This is episode 3 of Founders and Funders, and this week I have Simon Costello from FrankieOne. And we've worked together quite often over the years, but for the people who have not heard of FrankieOne, what does FrankieOne do?
Yeah, FrankieOne, we would consider ourselves an aggregator in the identity and fraud space. We've gone to some trouble. We've integrated, I think it's over 350 different third-party vendors across the world, and we bring it together into a single platform, single API, single agreement, single interaction point. And we help banks, fintechs, crypto companies, etc. On their journey of scaling up.
And how did you come up with this idea? And you have a co-founder, Aaron. Tell us the story of how this all got started.
Suppose if you really zoom out, I lived in London for many years and I saw the early neobank days, which was Monzo and Revolut were the rising stars. And I suppose I'd seen that and it was just a beautiful experience. Like, it was stunning. I could see the future, mobile, seamless experiences. It was great. That was sort of at the back of my head. I'd running a different company at that moment, and we were participating in hackathons actually with Monzo, or it was actually called Mondo at the time. Following my time in the UK, I actually did another company in Asia, and I suppose I've been away for about 10 years from Australia. I was did have one more startup I felt in me. And I was looking to move back to Australia, had seen, I suppose, that glimmer of the neobank, let's say, in the UK. And a combination of factors happened. One, there was a change in regulation in Australia to actually make it easier to get a banking license. And I was really, this really could be an opportunity. And it probably actually ties into how I met my co-founder. My experience, company called Money Hero, which is like a financial comparison site in Asia. We didn't have a technical co-founder, and I felt we were a little bit limited in our growth. And so I wanted to take that learning. And I thought, hey, if we're going to do a bank in Australia, there could be sort of things lining up here. It could be quite exciting, though I really do need a technical co-founder. I was actually quite friendly with SoftBank at the time. And they actually said, oh, look, I know a great guy that could be a potential co-founder for you. His name's Aaron Chipper. He's based in Singapore. He's also Australian, comes from the payments background. I thought, this is fantastic. So I flew in, met Aaron, explained the idea, what we were looking to do. And he said, oh, that sounds fantastic, but I've already got a job and I'm pretty happy. So probably now's not the time to come join an adventure to start a bank in Australia. Anyway, basically over the course of maybe 12 months, we were sort of explaining different ideas. I was bouncing thoughts off him. When he was in Indonesia, where I was based, he would come and we'd catch up. And look, we got along really well. Long story short, we end up moving to, he ended up thinking it's actually now a really good idea. And for him to move back to Australia with myself and start a digital bank named Frankie as the original plan. We raised some money, I put a team together, and we actually started applying for a banking license and actually building out the tech. As we went through this process, we found it amazingly difficult, technically and otherwise, actually building up the core infrastructure for a bank. And we were actually, to be honest, quite surprised. And the first thing, to be totally honest, we're working on is just to onboard a customer, like really simple stuff. We had to connect a whole number of different services, the people that take the photo, the people that do the KYC, the people that do the AML, all the fraud tools. And we wanted obviously the best experience and try to research the market. Anyway, we found this part extremely challenging and we were kind of surprised, how has this not been done? And coupled with other challenges, I suppose, in building a bank, we actually made the decision to no longer go full end to end and actually making a bank. We actually decided to return investors' money at the time because we were like, hey, we actually don't think necessarily the same opportunities what we first thought for a B2C based neobank, like a Monzo Revolut style play focused on Australia. And that was actually a really difficult time, to be fair. Gave money back, which was also very challenging. Told my other co-founder, which was Warren Oakes at the time. There was the three of us, actually 3 co-founders. And he was at McKinsey at the time and said, hey, look, well, while we're in flux and we're unsure exactly what's happening, Warren actually went back to work at McKinsey. So it's just Aaron and myself. And ultimately, through trial and error, we ultimately got a slightly different business model, which is actually building the infrastructure for other neobanks, fintechs, banks, etc. And that's ultimately how we ended up pivoting to FrankieOne, where it is today.
Nice. I have some questions regarding your funding. So you said you raised some money and started building. What did you have at that point to raise the capital?
At that moment, it was more based on an idea, a fantastic deck, long-standing relationships. And I think we're like super early stage. It is very much backed more by the team and, broadly speaking, what the concept is. And so we had very supportive investors at the time willing to back us as a team. They gave us some what we call pre-seed, I suppose, capital. And yeah, we're looking to try and kick things off.
Okay, great. So these were people you had in your network that you raised capital from.
Exactly.
Nice. With even though you cut your scope of instead of building a neobank to supporting other neobanks with onboarding, what did your first iteration of your product look like? When you launched, what was FrankieOne?
Firstly, the first part was actually, I suppose, validation. We're just trying to working out, hey, look, does this have product market fit? And given we know the neobank space very well, we understand the challenge. We understand, obviously, all the players in the market. Our first sort of people we started reaching out to were other, formerly known as competitors to now potential customers. And so we reached out to one, I was a listed payments company, and two with another neobank. We approached them and said, hey, look, this is the challenges we faced. Have you been experiencing the same thing? They said, absolutely. We're actually going through the same process. And then we said, hey, look, well, if we build this piece, would you become a customer? And they said, yeah, if you build that, we'll be happy to be a customer. And I think that's one of the huge differences between B2C and B2B. Now we could actually have a customer. They could sign a contract, pay up front, have some level of a commitment. And that was actually hugely validating for ourselves to say, hey, this is a business now. This is real. It's really early stages. And so our MVP was connecting a number of different data sources, Australia only at this moment, and it was just an API. And that was some of our first customers that we brought on. And I think really because we could speak to these customers at such level of depth and had a real fundamental understanding of the pain that they'd gone through because we were sitting on their side, which allowed us to, I suppose, win the first customers, again, based on a presentation, beautiful Figma demonstration. And I think to be full credit to our early customers, real belief, I suppose, in that founding team and idea, because they were taking, I suppose, a lot of risk on us because they were very transparent. We hadn't built it yet, but we managed to get a signed contract ahead of building the product, which really de-risked it for ourselves. And then also for following on it when we did actually go back to market and we raised again, which was very helpful.
What do you think convinced them to take a chance with a startup with a beautiful presentation? Was it the competitive pricing? Was it the strength of the connection, or just another factor that made them want to sign with someone who hasn't fully built their product yet?
I think being fully transparent, going, hey, these are the problems we had. This is how we're looking to solve it. Really understanding our customers was the first piece. Second to that was, I think they could really see that both Aaron and myself were 100% in, and having a direct line to the CEO, having a mobile number, if there's any challenge, and to the CTO, if there was any challenges, they know that they are the number one priority. And I think when some of the incumbents in our space are far larger, obviously, and they were more sort of considered a number. I think pricing was an element, but I don't necessarily think it was the major factor that they would take the risk. I think it was much more about belief in what we're looking to build. It really was something materially different than what was in the market. And yeah, I suppose their conviction and belief in what we could do.
So it sounds like it'd be easy to raise your next round, having some customers signed and an MVP. How was it raising your next round after you've signed your customers?
So it was a bit of an awkward chat, to be honest, because we ended up calling back up the investors that we returned the money. and said, "Hey, remember me? You know, the idea that I had called Frankie? Well, it's now moved to FrankieOne. And hey, here's the new idea. And actually, we've got a little bit of traction. We've actually now got customers. Here is what's signed. Here's the market. Here's the landscape." And what's actually amazing, we actually had all our investors that had given us money before went 100%. We're in for the new business. And it's actually, I didn't necessarily expect that, but their response was, "You actually earned our trust the first time round. The fact you gave back money when you didn't think was the same opportunity. And two, equally, we really liked the new business idea. And yeah, we're all in." So actually raising the round was actually very straightforward because they actually got to see a little bit of the journey. They hadn't taken a loss. And if anything, it actually had improved, hopefully, from their position. So it was actually very straightforward.
There's a benefit to them. They got to follow it without investing. They got
Exactly.
at a less risky state. And what was the capital meant allocated for? The raise? Why did you want to raise at that point?
So at that point, it was really paying for some AWS costs and people costs, which is people is end up like 99 or let's say 95% of your costs. So it allowed us to bring on some engineers and allow to pay for some staff basically to get a MVP into market.
Yeah. When I talk to some startups and they start generating revenue and they get their raise, often they hire really quickly, start dreaming of all these growth plans, and then burn through their raise, their capital. How did you stay focused on spending the money appropriately, and how did it work out with that round? What were you able to accomplish with it?
So we definitely were raising on milestone based, having and speaking, being very transparent with the investors, saying, "Hey, look, we're going to raise a little bit of money now. Our plan is to bring on 1 or 2 customers, or I can't remember now, maybe it was 5 or something like that, maybe 10, prove it out and validate, etc. Give proof points back to the investors and giving them full warning of like, we will raise again in 6 months, 12 months. To be honest, I can't exactly remember the detail of what the time frame was, but it was something short inside 12 months. And we were quite diligent in that maybe diligent the word. We were absolute tight asses. So Aaron and I obviously didn't pay ourselves a wage. All money went into product development, engineering, and then we had the benefit, I suppose, of the business model is that we were signing customers for a 12 months plus level agreement. We could see cash flows quite early on, and also at the same time we were communicating very quickly back to investors. They could see early traction and allowed us to raise the next round without getting to that scary moment that you're referring to where you're getting your bank balance gets very low and it gets scary.
Yeah. And when I talk to startup founders, there's some hesitation sometimes often to give up too much equity too early, since the earlier you raise, then the lower the valuation and you might need to give up more. How did you decide that balance of keeping ownership of the company while raising capital to grow the company?
So you're right, especially in tech world, valuation is very difficult to identify. And you're right, there's a lot of dispute. Usually founder wants a far higher valuation, and a traditional investor has great difficulty in working out what the valuation is. So understanding that, we actually decided to move with a safe note. And the reason we went with a safe note and that structure is that it allowed us not to have that debate, let's say, on valuation. We will obviously agree on a cap at a discount, but the idea is it's very difficult for both parties to work out what is the right valuation. Hence the benefit of a safe. We don't have to have that argument or discussion. It's really for follow-on rounds once we actually have more data points to start working that out. And that allowed us to move quickly, not having this big discussion about what is the right valuation, because who really knows? We didn't know exactly what the success of the business is going to be. They didn't know either. And so having a safe early on was actually really helpful to, let's say, kick that can down the road once we had more data points, and then we could actually start doing a price round.
Yeah. So for people who aren't familiar with that concept, explain, how does it work? since it solves the problem of not knowing the valuation? How does it work when you set it up?
So let me start both sides. So traditionally, you would raise money and you would set a valuation, and you ask that investor, would you like to buy into my company? I'm valuing it, in quotation marks, $5 million. And then they'll buy a piece. That is, let's call it the traditional way of raising money. What we went is what's called a safe note. It's actually very common in the States, not so common in Australia, or certainly when we were raising. It's about a 5-page document. It's extremely simple. It's based on the premise that we have a maximum value of the company. So, for example, if we believed we were 5 million, we might put a maximum value of 10 million. Again, we need to agree on a maximum value. It's called a cap. And then we have another instrument, which is called the discount. And so how the discount works is you want to give an advantage to the early investor, but we also don't want to work out what the valuation is. And so I believe that we have played a discount, and it usually ranges between 20 and, let's say, 0%, but like but usually ranges between a 20% discount and a 10% discount. And what ends up happening is we make an agreement saying you'll invest X amount of money, and effectively you'll get a 20% discount on the next round. And the benefit of that is on the next round, we'll have more data, we'll have sophisticated investors coming in, we'll have more proof points to be more accurate valuation, or what we call a price round. And so that worked for us, is that we agreed on a discount and we agreed on a maximum value, and allowed us to move very quickly.
Excellent. So you raised the capital and you started building. What did the next 12, 18 months look like? Now you've got capital and you're building out your team. What happened with FrankieOne? What were you able to do?
Now we had some money in the bank. It's a very small amount of money to be transparent. I think we say we've got money in the bank. Sounds like it's $1 million. It's not.
You had infrastructure?
So, and maybe for context for everyone, we've raised about $50 million to date now. But at the time, the pre-seed round, I think it was either $400,000 or $600,000.
That's a lot of AWS infrastructure.
It sounds like a lot of money, I suppose, when you zoom out over sort of 5-6 years, raising sort of amount of capital. But at the start, it's still super lean, which, by the way, I 100% agree with. Is the right way to approach it. You want to be super disciplined and laser focused on the costs. So actually, it causes a lot of pain, but I actually do believe, doing this a couple of times, that actually is the right process. So we have this money, and to be honest, it's still not a lot of money. So it's not like we're going into the market and we're getting people with 10, 20 years experience. We're actually reaching out to our immediate network, effectively friends and family, to help build the product. And so Aaron's reaching out to his network from engineers. I'm reaching out to my network from a product and engineering standpoint. And we have basically selling the dream to a degree in relation to both investors, but also early staff members. And really is people that really believe in the vision and the founders came on. And obviously, they're not necessarily paid market rate, but hopefully we obviously pay an ESOP or an equity. And hopefully I'll see the benefits going on. And we're, again, very grateful for the early employees and what they were able to come in and really have belief in us to build what we did and get us to the next milestone, which is, say, another 10 customers.
Okay.
And by 12 months, we had 50 customers. By a further 12 months, then we had 100 customers. And we were showing a nice trajectory, let's say, that both customers, investors, and also employees could see hopefully the trajectory of the company. And then things got a bit easier in relation to winning further customers, winning more investors, and also employees as well.
How were you winning those customers?
It was effectively direct sales. If you think of at the time, neobanking was very sexy. It was in fintech world, it was the new shiny thing. And there was lots of anticipation and excitement what these guys could do. We were quite successful in that space. And once we won a few neobanks, we won the majority of the neobanks in Australia. And that gave us a little bit of gravitas, let's say, in the industry. that, the new kids on the block were all selecting this company called FrankieOne. And I think that allowed us to prove ourselves up to some degree. And yeah, and then from an industry perspective, we started to winning awards in our space. And it was definitely a segment, I would say, that was a little bit unloved. KYC and AML is not necessarily, I think, the space where entrepreneurs necessarily dive and run into. It's certainly not as sexy as a B2C based company. And hence, there wasn't a lot of innovation in the space.
Yeah, in some ways, it's a nice blessing where you don't have as many competitors and you're competing with large players that can't move as quickly as you can. So as you gain these customers, what are you hearing from them as their new problems to be solved? You solved problems that you faced when you were building a neobank. When you started having 50 customers, what were your customers wanting out of FrankieOne? And then what did you provide them?
Well, actually, the funny early story is that when we started selling in what we thought we were selling an API, and I was like, yeah, this is great. We signed agreements, API, and you can imagine it's pretty basic agreements that we're sort of formulating, we're sort of putting together. And quite famously, working with one of the banks, and they were now understanding that not only they bought the API, but they also bought the portal or interface to what was happening for these KYC and AML checks. And I remember with the COO at the time of the bank saying, okay, great. API is great. When do we get access to the portal? And I'm looking back saying, portal? And they're like, yeah. We need to get access to the portal because all our customer service team at the bank need to access this. And I'm like, my understanding is you just wanted the API. I'm like, no. We want the portal.
Yeah.
And that was one of those like, you're nodding and smiling back to the client saying, yep, of course we can provide that. Just give us a couple of weeks. I'll speak with the technology team and understand when that's going to be released. And that was a mad flurry of recruiting a front end team, designing a front end, building a front end, and really what I would call MVP, putting that into the hands of a client, doing absolute bare minimum, but allowing that bank to actually launch, which was obviously very critical for them that I have an interface. And so there was quite a lot of stress. But yes, the first part was an API. Second part was the portal itself. And that was like a mad rush to get that done. We ended up building that. Obviously, we were successful in the launch times, but after I think it was about 3 months, we actually we rebuilt it. It was not fit for scaling for 50 to 100 customers.
Nice. And now that you have 50 to 100 customers, you mentioned you've had several rounds. What were these subsequent rounds for? What were you raising capital for?
So it really was product and engineering. It's one of the most unique businesses I've run, where we had so much. I suppose if you think about when you normally raise capital, you've got product and engineering, and you've also got sales and marketing, and then you've also got some hard costs such as rent and the like. We actually put, I think it was 80% of our burn was actually on product and engineering. We didn't hire anyone in sales or marketing in the first 18 months. And so all money was going to product engineering, which is very standard in a startup. It's actually all on people. And the way we're winning customers is effectively doing hopefully a good job with our existing customers, promoting, I suppose, that in our industry. And then also the benefit is that we actually had our clients referring us, which we're very fortunate to their actual competitors, and actually managed to grow organically for the first couple of years without any spend in sales and marketing.
Nice. And with so many players recommending FrankieOne, how has the landscape changed since you launched? Do you see new competitors who are trying to compete with you more directly these days? Or is it a field that not too many venture into?
Yeah. Also, just I suppose the landscape is that when we were raising money and had a reasonable sort of size of the market, certainly in Australia anyway, it was 2020, 2021, and money was a little more freely available. There were companies operating in a similar way that we were, and as a founder, there is actually a huge amount of stress that you get at that moment. You think, oh my God, we're getting people copying us, and we'd look at the website and we're like, that is amazingly similar to ourselves. And then you have your investor network sending you investor decks going, hey, wait a minute, you've got a copycat following you. And at the time, like, you are stressed because you're like, oh my God, they're doing exactly the same thing as us. And zooming out now, that is not the case. And also funding landscape from a funding perspective has very much changed. And so I think we're very lucky and very fortunate in our timing that we did have some first mover advantage. Were able to raise a decent amount of capital, and then the market turned, and we now don't have too many copycats, if any, certainly on this side of the world, on what we're doing. And that's no longer what was at the time considered a potential threat, but ended up not being a threat. We were a bit further along, had raised a bit more money, had a stronger product market fit, and able to sort of get away, if you will.
What would you do if you were starting a new, not necessarily regtech, but a tech startup in this current environment? How would your approach be different than your approach back then?
So we raise venture capital money, and venture capital money is not always the right approach to go. And I wouldn't recommend it necessarily for everybody. Raising money in venture capital is like entering the Olympics. You are aiming to be the best of the best on a global scale. VCs only want billion-dollar outcomes. And their whole mantra is they're trying to pick the best of the best. They will absolutely very happy to give you money as long as you're going to go big and go fast and be the best in your space. Though you are very dependent, because what ends up happening is you take more money and you start building out a product that's super scalable, and you're very dependent on external funding. Market conditions at that time allowed for that. And hence, raising, $50 million is only possible when capital markets allow. But your question was, what would you do now?
Yeah.
The landscape isn't the same. And so for me, raising a company, whether regtech or otherwise now, it would be a little bit scary, to be honest, if I was so dependent on external funding. So I think you'd have a different business model. You'd have different metrics. I would very much not want to be so dependent on so much capital. I would be looking at a B2B company, which is traditionally you raise less money than a B2C. You get more proof points. It's easier to raise money. And I would try to be far more conservative in the way that I spend money and the way I raise money as well.
Yeah. And what's happening in the regtech space today? What trends are there? What threats are there, do you see in the next several years?
So we broadly fit into the fintech area, which is, I would say, regtech is a subset of fintech. Unfortunately, fintech has fallen a little bit out of favor, let's say, sort of globally. That you could argue has some level of advantage in being a regtech, is that in the industry, it is widely understood that regulation is here to stay and it's ongoing. And so from a market trend perspective, it is far more consistent likelihood. If you sort of think 5 to 10 years out, there is probably going to be KYC. There's probably is going to be AML regulations, and this is a consistent need. Whereas if you think in the landscape, such as buy now, pay later or otherwise, they can't necessarily have that same conviction because consumer preferences might change. Mm-hmm. So we are fortunate in the space that we have long-term investors that believe in what we're doing. We also have our clients. We have now sort of focused much more on the bigger end of town. And so we service, say, 3 of the big 4 tier 1 banks in Australia. We service 3 of the top 5 crypto companies in the world. And we are looking, I suppose, to service the customers that are around for the long term, let's say, and have sort of global sort of ambitions. So, and as far as the landscape, there are still many of different players, I suppose, coming in. But as an aggregator, if anything, they're actually advantageous, because when it's a highly fractured market and there are lots of small little players, there is a huge advantage to have data that can help plug them into the network and provide them to customers. So I think we've been fortunate in our relation to our market landscape timing, in relation to funding, and also fortunate even in downtimes that we have long-term investors that believe in the space and the company.
How much, if any, does AI impact your field and your product and your space, if at all?
Actually, AI impacts it hugely. So AI definitely is in a hype cycle at the moment. You could argue for good reason. I'm personally one of the big believers, so take maybe what I say with a grain of salt. But but there's two sides. One is how can we empower our customers, and the second side is given that we're protecting our customers against fraudulent activities and the like. There's you can have bad actors use AI for nefarious circumstances. Let me start with the first one. So firstly, we have almost 60% of the Australian population running through FrankieOne. So we have a huge data set. As you can imagine, with AI, having, or LLM, let's say right now, which is, I suppose, very topical, having a way that you can interact with natural language instead of using SQL and trying to interrogate data in a technical way, you can now use an LLM. Very exciting. So firstly, now our clients are very much product managers, more than what most people think as we deal with compliance and fraud officers. It actually usually is with product managers. And a product manager, sometimes technical, but not always. If now you can actually give them an interface into the world of regulation, they can chat to on the FrankieOne portal in natural language and ask, hey, where are my challenges? What's my pass rates in different regions? How do I compare? If you're running a buy now, pay later company, how do I compare to my other peers in the space? Are my pass rates above or below? Are my fraud rates above or below? This is extremely powerful way that you can interact with your company, with the data, understanding where you're positioning, something that wasn't possible before. And so we're introducing next quarter AI agents that will actually be able to sit there almost like a buddy that can actually do some of the mundane work, let's say, of a compliance officer, of a product officer, and as a fraud officer. And we can start training these agents to do some of the heavy lifting or mundane work. That historically was never possible before. And so personally, I've been following AI for some time, but I am genuinely super excited to be able to offer a 10x improvement than what is available in the market today. So I'm excited from that perspective. But equally, on the other side is everybody has access to AI, and you can use AI in lots of different ways. And what we're seeing is a huge amount it's very easy for an individual to use AI to create fictitious documents, to create fictitious individuals and start signing up. And we're having different attack vectors that are happening with the aid of AI from our clients. And so we need to be upskilling and arming ourselves up to be able to protect our customers. And so it's a bit of a double-edged sword with AI, though overall I'm hugely positive on what could happen, and it's actually be very material to FrankieOne and our customers.
And how are you structuring FrankieOne, the company, the organization, and your teams to grow and also leverage AI?
So we have a data team now, dedicated product manager, dedicated engineers. We have been working for the last 2 years on internally. It's a total coincidental, by the way. I'd love to say that we had predicted it. And again, I feel we're very fortunate in that we had 2 years ago been structuring our data in a way that it's retrievable and easy to, in a very structured way. So that has now come to fruition, and it almost looks like it's easy for us. So we just put an LLM at the front, and it's all of a sudden you can retrieve information and data in a lovely way. We were doing that anyway, and then we just got very much caught, or very fortunate that LLMs really started improving, that now we're putting that at the interface. So we have a data team that is now allowing us to change the way that our customers interface with ourselves. That is probably the most immediate sort of way that we're thinking and how we're changing structurally. On our perspective, internally, we have hackathons twice a year at FrankieOne, and the last 18 months has all been very AI focused. And so this is basically where the company all pauses work for a day and a half, and we all do a hackathon. We all work on the latest AI tools. We work at how we can either make ourselves more efficient or actually work on different products that we can put an MVP together. We replay it back to the team, to the company, and work out what it is we could potentially use or give to our customers or use internally. And that has spawned many different ideas and products and features and the like that we now use today.
So just to give some perspective to listeners, how big is FrankieOne now as a company of people?
We're about 130 people, give or take. We've got sort of our head HQ is in Australia, and we have majority of people in Australia, but we also have remote teams as well.
And what are some exciting things that came out of these hackathons that you spoke of?
So an example is just analytics, being able to visually see in real time how your entire bank is actually performing as far as from an onboarding perspective, how it is that you compare against your different peers, how it is. One really exciting piece is now that we've got many different financial institutions, we can identify if there's a bad actor in the system and it's been a bad actor for one financial institution, and we can actually see the same traits, whether it be the same phone, the same IP address, the same KYC information they've provided, we can now in real time flag to our other customers and let them know that, hey, someone in the network has identified this customer as a bad actor, and you can look to take action with them. And so hopefully we're starting to have material impact on fraud events as well.
Yeah. Now that FrankieOne is such a large company and you're still leading the company, how do you prioritize your time and decide what's the best use of your time?
So look, you're right. When you start, obviously you're wearing the CPO hat, the COO hat, and the CEO hat, and plenty of others, and as well. To scaling, from 5 people to 130 is a challenge. I don't know if we've got it perfectly right, to be honest, on how, hands-on or not hands-on you should be. Sort of learning by doing, to be transparent. So initially it was very focused on my early days. Like I would do product and I would do, let's call it sales. And now as we sort of start to scale and get bigger, I am less involved from a sales side and more involved in a sort of strategic sort of product perspective. We've got some large customers that I still am very involved in. And so very much still get to hear from the customer directly what exactly they're after and the like. But, I've got a very fortunate to have a great leadership team, and a lot of the heavy lifting, I'm very fortunate today, are super involved and hands-on, and allows me to have a greater, I suppose, work on the business instead of in the business, so to speak.
Yeah. What would you attribute your leadership style to? Any influences in particular, or through discovery?
I think you look at the magnificent 7, if you will, of the tech companies, which I think pretty much all US, and a lot of them are still founder-led. And I think one of the benefits of the tech space is everybody shares information very freely, and there's lots of information on how to, like the management style. And it is amazingly different on how people operate. Personally, I still am extremely passionate and have a lot of historical knowledge in the company. And so I'm able to contribute, whether it be from a product or sales perspective. There's certain areas where I'm stronger than others. I am not a technical person, though I'm able to have a product, like let's say conversation. And so there are certain areas that I will be able to share my expertise and get far more hands-on than other areas. And so the example is maybe in a security standpoint, I am less strong. And hence we have our head of security and CISO. I am very much looking for their guidance. Whereas the other areas where I might be able to contribute more, which is what is our large customer seeking and how we should start thinking about sequencing product build.
Yeah. What is the most challenging part of your job?
I would say even when you scale, I think a lot of people think now you've got money, now you can get people.
Yeah.
Oh, and now there's so much work to do. All you do is just hire more people and then all the work gets done. And there is an element of that's true, but then usually when you bring in more people, there are more people to manage. There's more people, there's more communication required. There is more managing personalities. And so your problems change. They don't necessarily get easier. And I think I certainly like relearning the lesson. Oh, once you get more money, once you get all the customers, then everything's easier. And then I work 9 to 5, and then I actually just have to lock in, click some buttons, have a few meetings, and they're good. Unfortunately, that is not exactly how it works. And what ends up happening is you are managing people more than you're actually directly getting hands-on. And the irony is, I was speaking to the other day, it's you're moving from, let's call it, everyone's very familiar with a full stack developer. Full stack developer means you both know front end, both back end. You know the architecture very well. You're hands on. You can use one developer and you can complete something end to end. It's super efficient. Now, if you think early in the company, CEO, otherwise, it's actually the same thing. As a CEO, you're a full stack salesperson. You're a full stack marketing person. You're a full stack, let's call it, employee. As you start scaling, now you've got to deal with far more people. You actually get more specialized. And actually, you get more inefficient.
Yeah.
The irony. And so it actually, whereas things that you could have taken you far quicker, build a presentation, speak to a client, you quickly speak to, your product manager. But now we've got 5 product managers, and now one piece of technology interacts with the other. And all of a sudden you can't run as fast, which is actually for a CEO is something to you need to handle. You're like, wow, okay, we can't move as the speed at which we do. We need to actually have more communications. There is challenges for a CEO in the way that I always want to be moving far faster, and I always feel we're 10% behind we should be. And I think it is, even just from a personal standpoint, and understanding that we sometimes do need to go a little bit slower to bring everybody up to speed and bring everybody up to the sort of the same place as where you were, is some of the things that I think leadership constantly need to, or certainly founding members of the team need to grapple with. But yeah, it's the challenges, I suppose, are that communication, organized, making sure everybody's on the same page, aligning to the same vision and mission.
Yeah, that leads us to our final question. What's the end goal for you with FrankieOne? Is it an exit? Is it your life's work? This will be until your last day on earth. What is the end goal for you with FrankieOne?
Yeah, I do get this question sometimes quite a bit on what the plan is. We probably don't think, I suppose, so much in, building for exit. Our approach is, hey, let's build a great product that people love, and think an exit or opportunity or liquidity event will come thereafter. So at the moment, we're still super passionate. We've still got huge amounts to do. We've still got lots of space to help our existing customers, help further customers, and very focused, I suppose, at that, the unit economics of the business, helping our existing customers. And then who knows, to be totally honest, I'm not a great predictor of the future. And especially, look, we've had a pretty amazing run as a company. Feel very fortunate. Hopefully that will continue, but yeah, not sure.
If you couldn't run FrankieOne, what would you be doing with your time?
I think I'll personally be eternally working. I am not the guy that would sit at a beach all day or sit by the pool. I personally need to be constantly doing things. It's just who I am. So if I wasn't running FrankieOne, I would be very hands-on, I think, in another organization, something else. I need to be keeping myself occupied.
Great. Simon, I always appreciate our chats. And for listeners who want to know more, where can they find out more about FrankieOne? What's the best place to follow your journey?
Look, FrankieOne.com is our website. We've got all our different socials and means of sort of connecting and reaching out. But maybe start there, and and it should have all the information.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Simon.
Thank you.